Hi everybody, it's Kim from Patriot Garden, and today we're going to be talking about meat chickens. Today we're going to talk about the meat chickens, where they are in their development and what's ahead in their future. These guys are about 7 weeks old, actually 7 weeks old yesterday. I wanted to go over today the difference between raising chickens for eggs and raising chickens for meat, how they're fed differently and cared for slightly differently. Routines are a little bit different, and then what happens at 12 weeks when they're ready for processing. Now I'm raising 10 birds in this chicken tractor that I built. And we'll raise another 10 starting in July and ending about September. So that'll give us 20 chickens in the freezer for the year, and that should make it till next spring. Now the first thing is purchasing chickens for raising eggs or chickens for raising meat. Now there are plenty of breeds that are dual purpose, and if you're interested in a dual purpose bird, then you can do some research to decide which ones are best. I've got Orpington and Rhode Island Red mixes for my egg layers, and we purchase them as sex links, which means they are identified female and there's no chance of getting a rooster. Especially in my town, the zoning laws don't allow a rooster. Now that being said, a couple of these meat chickens have started to learn to crow, but they won't be here long enough to annoy my neighbors. The best meat birds are by far, in terms of weight and amount of meat on them, is Cornish Cross. Now I raised Cornish Cross the first year and I found them very unlikable. I guess if you're raising for commercial purposes, you'll ignore the fact that they're pretty messy and very disgusting. They'll eat themselves to death if left alone with food for 24 hours. I had a high loss rate at the end of the processing time, and they were just not pleasant birds to raise. A lot of people like Cornish Cross. They just weren't the birds for us. We are a small suburban homestead. I work full time, and having a different breed was something I wanted to try for the next time I raised meat chickens. So we went with Red Rangers, or otherwise known as Freedom Rangers. Now Freedom Rangers are great chickens. They have a better personality. They're not disgusting like a Cornish Cross, but they don't grow anywhere near as big. The breasts weren't as big. There wasn't as much meat on them, although they were a much nicer breed to raise. The last couple of years I've been raising a hybrid. Now I can't tell you what it is because the farmer will not disclose it. It's probably some sort of Red Ranger hybrid with something else. I'm not quite sure, but I do know I get the best of both worlds. I'm getting a bird that's processing out at over 8 pounds, which means they're dressing out at about 2/3 of that. Most meat birds will dress out at about 62% of their gross weight. And if you decide to keep the giblets, that could add another 9% to your dress weight. So these birds, even though I can't tell you what breed they are, I can tell you that they will gross weight at about 8.5 pounds and dress weight at about 70% of that. So they're a really great bird to put in the freezer. We're going to measure one today and see where they are at about 7 weeks. I'm going to be using a fish scale I bought off of Amazon. I'll leave a link down below with this product because I also use this for my vegetables, and I can keep track of how many pounds of food I grow in a year. This meter will let me weigh the tara weight, which is the weight of the empty bucket, and then adjust and subtract that amount from the chicken so that I'll know exactly what they weigh now. Okay, this is going to be a little tricky to do by myself. I've got a chicken in one hand and the scale in the other. I'm going to hook the scale onto the bucket. Oh, there we go. And I'm going to turn it on and click it into tara weight mode. And I'm going to lift it up and weigh it. It's 5.5 ounces. Now I'll click tara again so that it's at 0, and I'll put in our bird. Now that the bird's in, I can see that the bird is about 72 ounces. So now let's talk about the difference between feeding a bird that's meant to be an egg layer and feeding a bird that's meant to be a meat chicken. Both birds are going to start out with chick starter. Now chick starter has low calcium, high protein. Calcium at a very young age could be detrimental to their health, and they really need that protein to develop and grow. As they get older, they're switched out to another feed. Your egg layers, maturity date is about 6 weeks, but my egg layers never laid before 18 weeks. So I kept them on starter until they started laying, and then I put them on a layer feed. Now what the layer feed does is flip the protein to calcium ratio. So it lowers the protein and it ups the calcium because they have to start making those eggshells in their bodies. So they're going to need a little bit more calcium. Now with meat birds, there are actually 3 levels of feed. There's a starter, there's a grower, and there's a finisher. I have to be honest, I have never used the finisher feed. I always have started them on chick starter, and then when they get to be about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the weather, I put them outside and I immediately switch them to a grower feed. Now the grower feed increases the protein, but it doesn't have the calcium because they don't need the calcium. You're not raising them to be egg layers. So it just keeps that high protein going so that they'll develop body weight. Now I've read everything online from keep food available to them for 24 hours. However, I have also discovered other people that say 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And I think that's probably geared toward those Cornish Cross chickens that literally will eat until they die. And so you would want to restrict their feed at night. I'm finding that this breed is really good at regulating their eating. They eat when they need to, and they're feasting on grass and bugs in the meantime. Now water is a different story, especially when the weather gets hot. Chickens actually do better in the cool weather and in the cold weather. When it gets hot, they tend to get hot. So that water 24 hours for either egg layers or meat birds is crucial to their health. Now for supplements, I give them the same supplements that I give my egg layers. I will put garlic or herbs in their water. I will put apple cider vinegar in their water just for good health. Now, how do you find a butcher when you're ready to butcher your chickens? On Facebook or other social media, there are communities and groups of people who raise chickens. And I've always been able to find a butcher when I needed it. There are halal butchers in every state, I would imagine, that you could take your chickens to. There are individual butchers. There are even mobile butchers that will come to your house. Now, the process of butchering, I think I could do myself. In fact, the next time I butcher with these guys, I might get a chance to actually learn how to do it. The process, I think, would probably be difficult the first time, and you would get used to it. There's probably always an element of sadness. You've been with these animals this whole time, but that develops the respect for the food that you're eating, and which I think is very important when you've seen it through to the last step. And you're able to really appreciate the sacrifice that the animals are making to feed you and your family. The biggest reason why I don't butcher my animals is the cost. I'm only butchering 10 at a time. To buy the cones, the plucker, the scalder, all of that equipment is very, very expensive. And the setup takes a long time. So to butcher just 10 chickens, that doesn't really make a lot of sense for me. So in our case, this time we're going to be taking our chickens to a friend who does butchering, who has all of the equipment, and that'll be sometime in July. When the butcher hands you back your chicken, I'll say it in the words of my son, the very first time we butchered chickens, I asked him to go get them out of the car because they were very heavy. We had raised those Cornish Cross and they were huge birds. And he was a little fearful to look in the bag, but when he did, he said, "Wow, it just looks like Purdue." Yes, they look like regular chickens you would buy from the grocery store. But of course, they've just been butchered. It's very important to let them rest refrigerated for about 24 to 48 hours. This is a little bit difficult to talk about, but I'll be honest, you have to let the body of the chicken go through the natural rigor process. You don't want to freeze a chicken that's in rigor because the muscles will be all tight. Just let the body just go into rigor and then naturally come out of rigor, and then it is safe to freeze them. Some butchers will give them back to you in a shrink wrap package. Some butchers will just give you the plastic bags and you shrink wrap them yourselves. I can do a video on that because I think that's the way we're going to go. He's just going to give them back to me in a cooler, and I'm going to take them home and shrink wrap them. I hope this video was helpful for you, especially if you're thinking about raising meat chickens. I mean, here I am in the middle of suburbia. I do have a little bit of privacy on each side with my neighbors. As I said, these meat chickens do start to crow just about now if there's any roosters in the mix, but they don't stick around for long, and my egg layers are quiet and docile animals. So I'm thinking my neighbors are okay with this, but there is something to be said about being able to raise your own food, be a little bit self-sustainable, and I'm able to provide for myself and for my family in normal times and in difficult times. If you have any more questions about this process, if you've not started yet and you need any more information, please leave a question in the comment box. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and a sincere thank you to all those people who are helping to grow this channel. It is starting to gain some momentum. It's very exciting. As the garden gets started, there's going to be more and more content being put up every week. So thank you again. Have a great evening and happy gardening.